So my name is Ramlotha. I come from Italy. I live in Italy, near the ashram in Cisternino. And I met Baba in 1978 when I was quite young. And then I was lucky enough to spend almost 1 year with him between 81 and 82 in Huracan. And now I'm here with you. And it's very nice to be like this.
Nice.
So I'm open to all the questions you might have, curiosity or anything.
Thank you. And I'm Ramloti, and I met Babaji in 1981. And having my children who were 8 and 10, I first went on a quick trip for 30 days to meet him without the children. And then that was in February of 81. And then I went back for the whole summer with my children who were 8 and 10 at the time in 81. And then I went again the summer of 82. So I also feel very grateful. And yes, so now we're open for questions. So if somebody wants to unmute and ask us a question, this is your time.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What, your names are similar. What do they mean?
So I'll let Ramlota start and then I'll add my 2 cents. Ramlota, I'd also like to know the story of when you got your name too, because that's exactly. And when you ask the question, because we don't necessarily see who it is, say your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Pam.
I thought it was Pam, but I didn't want to second guess. Okay, so Pam's asking that question. Thanks, Pam. It's my question too from Ramlota.
Yeah, well, the Ram, well, it's the name of God, of Indian God, an avatar of Vishnu, of Lord Vishnu. And the Lota is a water vessel, a recipient, a vessel where you use to put the water to offer to the temple, for example. Near the Murti, for sure, there must be a Lota somewhere there. That's a Lota. So we, as Shastriji told me, it's a vessel of God. Very auspicious name.
I didn't hear that word, Ramlota. It's the best what?
A vessel of God, no, God's vessel.
A vessel of God is what Shastriji.
Container.
Yes.
Container.
Yeah. So how did you get your name?
Well, I got my name on my second visit because the first one was very quick. I met Baba in Kalbhairav temple near Almora, Chittai Mandir, and for a very short 2-3 days, and then I went my way and he went see his own, and then I came back in 80 when I was ready, and well, when the first time that I went there, these 2 days, I didn't, never made pranam to him, and I never, I was resisting a lot to whatever, everything was happening there. And so when I came back now in 80, I was quite ready. So I met him near in the Gufa. I made full pranam to him, and then we stayed together a little, half an hour or so, and then he sent me up. He said, I come up 5 o'clock in the garden near the temple. And so I went there, and short around 4:30, for 15 minutes before, a devotee came with harmonium. I started singing Om Namah Shivaya. And I was there, and suddenly I felt that I was finally safe. I had arrived home, and I started crying and crying and crying for this relief. It was an immense relief that I felt that I was really arrived at home, and I felt that Baba would have never abandoned me and never failed me. And it was so intense, and I cried a lot. I couldn't stop crying. That good old Darshan, who was doing the service, he came up to me, I remember, and asked me, "Are you all right?" I said, "I'm so happy," and, and crying like I don't know, whatever. Like, and then Baba arrived, and he sat there, and everybody went up for darshan and make pranam, and I had all my little presents. And so I went up to make pranam, and I made pranam. I was very agitated, emotional, confused. And at a certain point, he made like this to me. I had a beard, and he made così, "Oh, italiano, bello," in Italian. He said, "Nice, nice Italian," like this. He tickled my beard, and he was very sweet. And then he said, "What is your name?" And I said, "Fabio." And he said, "No, no, 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 no. Your name, Ramlotha." And then I turned around, and Goradevi was there. And I said, "What does it mean, Goradevi?" "Oh, it's that thing we use when we go to shit." to clean our hands after we clean. This was great darshan. Goradevi was exceptional. I miss her so much, her sense of humor. So this is how I got my name.
Nice.
This is Avnish. How did you first know about Babaji the very first time, and what made you go? What inner desire made you go there and meet him? And if you can recall the first memorable thing that Baba said when you went there.
Well, I met Baba by chance, let's say. I went to India for like a tourist, but I was coming from, well, you know, my mother had, committed suicide. She killed herself the day before my 21st birthday. So it was a big shock, as you can imagine, for all my family. And for some reason, also it was my father and my brother and myself. And for some reason, also I was the youngest there, but I became like the glue of the three of us. My brother and father had a big fight. And so there was a lot of desperation really in our family in that moment. So I took care of my father. My brother left home. I took care of my father slowly. He came up again. And then when my brother came back home and they made peace and they decided to work together, I remember I went out of the house and I said, "I have to go away." I was very happy, but I said, "I have to go away. I have to go far." Europe was too small. And so I decided I go to India. Money was short, but I managed to go by land, long trip, and through an incredible series of coincidences, I arrived at Baba. It was really an incredible story. It's, I don't know if I can, it's a little bit long, but it gives an idea of how maybe Baba works. So I can try to, if you don't mind. It's
No,
okay?
please.
Okay.
Would love to. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I said the first, my city was Trieste. It was just on the border with ex-Yugoslavia. And so there was this train, famous Orient Express, who passed and met Paris to Istanbul. So that's we arrived to Istanbul very quickly with the train. And then we had very little money, so we had to decide, me and my girlfriend, how to proceed. We were exploring all the possibilities by train or everything, whatever. Then we were walking through Istanbul, and a Belgian boy comes up and said, "Do you want a free ride, all paid, to Tehran in Iran?" And I said, "Whoa, yes, of course, all paid, fantastic." So there were all a little shady business with one Indian and one Pakistani man who were dealing Mercedes used cars between Germany and Iran. It was a little shady affair, but they needed to fill the cars to pretend we were all tourists enjoying ourselves. So we got this thing, and we had to wait 5 days to leave in Istanbul. Every day we had to leave, and every day was some problem, we couldn't leave. Then finally one day I said, we are going. So I took my bags and I ran down the like I was in the hall of this small hotel. A man came inside. He was looking, I don't know, maybe between 20 and 40, could have any age. And he looked straight at me, and in Italian, he asked me, "Are there some room free?" And I said, "Yes, oh, we are living in many." And I went on, and I was putting my backpack in the trunk of the car. I thought, strange, he spoke to me straight in Italian, no? Normally you speak English, no? Anyway, this 20 days after 20,000, 15,000 kilometers after I was in Islamabad, in Pakistan, online to take the Indian visa outside the Indian embassy. It was maybe 50 degrees. It was May, extremely hot.
And this was 1978, did you say?
78, yeah. I was sick. I had diarrhea. Because I didn't know how to eat. I didn't know how to travel. I was really terrible shape. So I was online there to go up to the embassy, and there was a small bush there on my left. It was the sun, like a hammer. And there was this man. I see a pair of legs coming out of this bush. I arrived there, and I see this man who comes up and he said, "Hello, how are you?" And he greets me like we are all. And I'm very surprised, but I say, how? I recognized him immediately. And he came up in the line and he started talking to me. And he was a very nice guy. So he was Valeriano from Varese, a city of North Italy. And we started talking like this. And at a certain point, we take the visa, and he asked me, where do you plan to go in India? I said, I have no idea. It's my first time. I really don't know what to do. So he told me, "Oh, I'm going to Makloganj, Dharamsala. It's where the Dalai Lama lives. And to tell you how ignorant I was, I said, who is the Dalai Lama? Because I had no idea who was the Dalai Lama. And he told me, oh, he's the chief, a very realized being, the chief of the Tibetan, and I said, the Buddhists. And I said, well, I'm not interested in this spirituality. I told him, and it was the truth of where I was coming from. So I said, I'm not interested in this thing of spiritual things. And he looked at me and he said, but it's fresh. It's in the mountains and it's fresh. And so this was very good for me because of 50 degrees, that we were so tired. So I said, okay, I come. So I went up to this Makloganj. I found a place. It was nice. The mountains, fresh, very beautiful. And after one day that I was there in the little restaurant, I arrived this man Valeriano, and he said, where are you staying? In an hotel here? Oh, I sleep outside. There is close by here, there is a Shiva temple, and I sleep in the garden of this Shiva temple. It's about 5 kilometers from the village. So I go there. I found this little Shiva temple where there was a small camp in the garden of this Shiva temple. They made a little camp and people were sleeping outside. It was very nice. There was a spring of fresh water close by, big. So I say, I like it here. So I came there with my girlfriend. We stayed there a few days. And then all the Westerners, mostly all of the Westerners who were there were Buddhist devotees, or people who were coming there for this for this Buddha, for follow the teachings. And I was not interested, no. So I found them very fanatic. Really couldn't speak to them very much because they think I thought they were a little bit crazy. Nice people, but crazy. So I was there once in our little camp. I was playing chess with a French guy who was staying there, and a group of these Buddhists came, and they met close by, and they were all talking. And also this, my friend Valeriano was there. So they were all sharing experiences, things, and at a certain point, this Valeriano said, "Oh, but you know, not far from here lives the famous Babaji of Yogananda." So everybody said, "No, it's not possible. Babaji of Yogananda from the book of the Yogi, it's unreachable. You cannot see him." They all made this kind of question, and Valeriano was very serious in these things, and. I have to say that I got to know this Valeriano, and I liked him a lot because he was a very serious man. He worked with different able people in Italy. He was serving people with problems, and he was a very nice man, simple, humble. So I kind of liked him a lot. And then he had told me that he had come to India to go to study yoga in Rishikesh, Hatha Yoga. And so I said, okay, he looked okay. He was not talking too much about spirituality. He was not trying to impress and was not preaching. He was a very nice man. So I liked him a lot. So I heard all the commotion, the surprise of all the others who heard that the Babaji of Yogananda was living there close by, and it was impossible according to them. But he was very, and he said, "No, I met him. I went to his ashram," and he told some stories that I heard while I was playing chess. Some very wondrous, fantastic stories he told that to these people. So I was surprised. And later that evening, when we were washing the dishes after dinner, and I said, "Valeriano, I heard you about this experience you have with this Babaji, what his name?" And so he told me that he had met this Babaji, that he was a friend of Italian lady called Valeria, and she had stayed a long time with Babaji in Herakan, and then she came back, and he heard about this Babaji from her, and he went to visit him, and he saw him, and he told me incredible stories. At a certain point, he said, "I saw him with 4 arms." And I looked at him and said, "What do you mean 4 arms?" He said, "But it was real, as I see you now." So I was a little surprised. I thought maybe he has some problems, Valeriano, but I liked him a lot because of his nature, and because he was serving disabled people in Italy. I liked him. I liked him. So he explained me that when he went in there, he had problems to take in all the energy of Baba. So this man has an incredible energy because he is an avatar. So I didn't know what an avatar was, so but still I liked him, Valeriano, very much. So he explained me that he had decided to go to Rishikesh, study Hatha Yoga for 6 months. So to purify himself in order to be ready to take in all Baba's energy, because the other time he ran away from the ashram because he couldn't take it. So I said, "Wow, incredible story." Okay, well, fine, everything is fine. Good luck, I told him. And so 3-4 days later, I'm coming back from the village after I went to buy lunch and to buy some veggies, some food. And I'm talking, and I see Valeriano coming back with his suitcase. And I said, Valeriano, where are you going? I'm going back to Italy. And he's like, what do you mean? You're going back to Italy? He said, yes. I realized that I have to go back. And I said, but why? You had to go to Rishikesh to study yoga and then reach Babaji. And he told me, no, I realized that it was all my trip, a stupid mind trip. Babaji said to me, serve mankind. And I have my disabled people there. This was all a fantasy, an illusion. I have to go back and take care of them. So I was really surprised because, I thought, okay, also if you decide to go to, that you have to do this, you are already in India, you made a long trip to arrive there. I mean, stay and enjoy a little bit, then go back and do your things. No, instead he was adamant, I have to go back now. So I was really surprised and I said, okay, let me help you. And so I took, he had one suitcase and a bag. I took a small bag and I walked back with him to the village. And while we were arriving, the bus arrived, he climbed on the bus and at the last moment he turned and said, do you have a map of India? And I said, well, yes. And I had this little map, like A4 that they gave me when I entered the border. It was only the rivers and the railways. It was designed on it, very small map of India. And he said, oh, because I'm going to make a dot where the Babaji's ashram is. And he said, Valeriano, I'm not interested in these things. I told him, no, I said, I make it because you don't know. And he made this little dot with the pen above Haldwani, about Katkodam. He made Babaji's ashram is here. And I said, okay. So off he went. And I went back to my Shiva garden. And after some 2 weeks, we started to travel. June had come, monsoon started. So we started to traveling up on the north over the mountains to stay a little bit out from the plains. I make it short. Then we arrived to a place and we decided we want to go to Nepal. I wanted to go to Nepal. And so we had to go back to Delhi to take the visa in Delhi. So we arrive in Delhi. I go to the Nepali embassy. They gave me the visa. I come back. The next morning, I wake up to go to I was sleeping in a tourist camp in front of the bus station in Kashmiri Gate in Delhi. I go up to the bus station to take the first bus to go towards Nepal. And they tell me, no, all the roads are blocked because the Jamuna, the river, came up and all the roads, all the railways, everything is blocked. Delhi is completely isolated. I said, wow. So I go back to the camp, and every morning was this ritual that I had. There was a very beautiful chai shop in the bus stand. So I got up and I went there, had the breakfast and asked the information, how was the situation? And nothing. For 3, 4, 5 days, I don't remember, 3, 4 days for sure, always flooded. All the roads flooded, couldn't go anywhere. Then the next morning, I woke up very early. I was sleeping outside to save money, always. I had a little plastic. I put it on the grass and a sleeping bag, and then another plastic to cover myself if rain came. I was 21 years old, very young, and food. And I saw a beautiful bird. Look, big, like how you call it, heron. This tall bird with long legs. And it was very beautiful, and I was so surprised. I looked at, as soon as I opened my eyes, I saw this beautiful bird, and it made me feel happier for some reason. So I got up, I went to the bus stand, I took my chai, And then I went to ask, is there anything open? He says, the first railway opened, but only till Bareilly. And I looked on the map and it was Bareilly, and it was going then off to Uttar Pradesh towards Varanasi, Benares, and everything towards Nepal. But Bareilly, then you could take and go to Haldwani and Katgoda, just where the Babaji ashram was. And in that moment, I had a very strong desire to go to see this Baba that Valeriano talked to me about. It was very, very strong desire. So I decided that, okay, it's close to Nepal, why not? Just to see him, and then no problem, just not that I am interested, but it's close to Nepal, it's on my way. I just can go and see this guy. And so we went took the train, and we went to Bareilly, then we changed the train, we went to Katgoda, and then we went to sleep. We slept there is a lodge in the train station. So we slept there, and the next morning we went up and we asked about Babaji. Where is Babaji? You know, Babaji is everybody in India. And so we said, we have the ashram Babaji. Valeriano had told me that this ashram had a step with 108 steps, a big, you know. So I knew something about the ashram, physical, that there was these 108 steps to go up to the ashram and like this. So I went around and I started to ask Babaji's ashram, and they brought me to all kind of Babas that didn't look at all like the one Valeriano told me about. So I was quite frustrated. And then he told me he's up on the river. So at a certain point, after one day of going around Haldwani, being brought to 3-4 different Babas that they were kind of ugly also. So I went back and talked with my girlfriend. They said, oh, let's follow the river. No? He said that the ashram is on the river. And we go up the river, and soon we will find this ashram. I said, okay, yes. So the next morning we started and we go up the river, but there is a little point where you cannot really follow the river. You have to do like this. And it's just at the point where there is the Gautama Ganga coming in, joining this other river, the Gola River. So I missed and I followed the other river. So after one, the road started to get really steep, and we went down, and there was the rice fields and mud and the rain, and it was terrible. And in the evening, we emerged at Nainital. Nainital is a beautiful little village, touristic village around the lake, full of Indian tourists it was. So I arrived there and I felt so stupid, you know, because we walked all day, different in horrible situation, while I could have taken a bus and arrived there in 2 hours very nicely. And so I was very frustrated, and I went there in the first hotel and I slept there. But this desire was so strong to go and see this Babaji, you know. I didn't realize it was a little strange, the intensity of my desire. It was a little bit strange, but I didn't realize at the moment. So I said, I went around and around and kept asking about this Babaji, because Valeriano didn't tell me Herakan. So I only knew Babaji. And so I went around and around and around, and a guy said, I know a Babaji there with this lady, because of this Italian lady who lived with him, no? Because Valeriano had told me her friend Valeria was a long time with him. So I told to my Indian friends that this is the situation, so that maybe we know. So they brought me to a little group of farms in the middle under Nainital, where there were 4 brothers living together in a little valley, and there was a Baba with an American girl. that they were living there. So I arrived there. I realized that it couldn't be the place that Valeriano had told me, because it was nothing was there, not a temple, not this big 108 steps, nothing. But these families were so loving, so beautiful people. And I have to say that when I arrived in India, the first time when I crossed the border in Lahore to go to Amritsar, and I saw my first Indian woman with the sari, for the first time in my life, I felt at home. I felt, wow, so beautiful. I loved India a lot. And this family they were very nice, these people. So they gave us a little house, separate. They cooked for us. They said, you wait here, our Baba will come tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. So we stayed there, spoiled by all these beautiful Indian families. And after 2 days, this Baba arrived with this American woman. So we started talking a little bit, and after a while, this American woman said, oh, I think I know who you are talking about. You are talking about Harakan Baba. And I said, I don't know, but she said, yes, the description you made, this ashram with the 108 steps, and yes, it must be Harakan Baba. And it's not far from here. And she explained me how to arrive to Herakan. So she told me, you have to go back to Katkudam first. So I went back to Katkudam. I slept there, and then I went up in the morning, and I asked the man of the information in the station, how far is Herakan? Oh, he said it's 4 or 5 kilometers. Oh, he said 4 or 5 kilometers. I thought, but if it's 1 hour walk, 2 hours, if you get slowly, for sure I would have walked slow, so I said 2 hours, very easy. So we had a good breakfast, we start walking, and we see where we made a mistake, we followed the wrong river, we go up, but it was not 4 kilometers, it was some 12, 14 kilometers to arrive to a dam side. So we arrived at dam side at almost night. The river was full because monsoon was full, couldn't proceed, and I said, when can I sleep? So there were these workers who were working there to build a dam. This is already in 78, Ramloti, the dam was in construction. And so we slept there one night, and then in the morning we started to go up the hills. The road was not by the river, but up the hills. Was very slippery, very hot, very slippery. My girlfriend at a certain point couldn't walk anymore. She said, I'm too tired, let's go back. I said, no, I carry your bag. So I put her bag on top of my bag. Then we had a rope. I took a rope and I started pulling her. So I had an incredible desire to go to this Herakan place. Then after 1 hour like this in the jungle, 3 or 4 Indian men comes down and said, the road is blocked, washed away. This is impossible to go to Herakan. There is no road, nothing. And I said, oh, I was so disappointed. I said, but Babaji is not in Herakan, they told me. Babaji is in Aldwani. Oh God. So go back to this place, crossed again the river on this little thing above the water, this thing, and we go sleep again in Katkudam, destroyed, and we go to Haldwani. And I started to go around, and now I knew Herakan Baba. I would ask everybody, Herakan Baba, Herakan Baba, Herakan Baba. Certain point, also there 1 hour, 2 hours, nothing happened, all wrong information. I said, a man said, okay, come with me. And he brought me in a place that then I realized, Ramloti, years later, that was Muniraji's shop. Mm. So I entered the shop and it was full of potatoes and things that were waking. Muniraji was doing his business. I see this guy who looked like the boss sitting behind his chair, and I went up to him and I said, I want to know where Herakan Baba is. Mm-hmm. And he made like this. He turned his head and went inside, and I was so impatient, so frustrated, hungry, that I pushed him in the shoulder. Hey, hey! I said, I asked you a question. It was quite aggressive, and it was Muniraj, and he looked at me, and he said, Babaji is in Raniket, Chilianola Raniket. So I said, oh, how can I go to Raniket? And he said, there is a bus behind here. So we went there, and took a bus, and we arrived in Raniket. And remember, I arrived in Raniket, it was almost sunset. And the owner of this hotel where I slept, and showed me a little light, tiny light. He said, that's Herakan Mandir, Herakan Baba Mandir there, Chilianola. Okay, so we slept there. In the morning, we walked to Chilianola. We arrived in Chilianola. There was this beautiful temple, if you ever seen the picture of the Chilianola temple, but there was nothing inside. There was no ashram, only the temple empty, only with a big picture of Baba, beautiful picture of Baba when he went in pilgrimage to Amarnath. That he looked a little bit like an astronaut. We had a turban with a stick, and when this smile, incredibly beautiful smile. So that was the first time I saw a picture of Baba, and I said, oh, how young he is, and how handsome, very beautiful man. And I felt a good feeling, but nobody was there. So I was there, and I started calling, hello, hello, hello. After half an hour, an old man comes up. He looks at me, he makes a face, because I have to say, I had long hair, this beard, I was not very clean. I was looking like a hippie, you know. Well, I was not a hippie, but I was looking like a hippie. So he looked at me with by the face like this, chalo, chalo, go away, go away. And I said, no, but Harakam Baba, I started talking a little Hindi. So I said, Harakam Baba kahan hai, Harakam Baba kahan hai, where is Baba, where is Harakam Baba, where is Baba? And he was really pushing me away. At a certain point, I got really angry. So I went up to him, I grabbed him like this, and said, Harakam Baba kahan hai. I really shook him. And he looked at me and he said, Almora. Oh, Almora. Oh, I went back to the hotel, and I realized they told me that Almora was 4 hours, 5 hours of bus away. So I slept there, and next morning we went to Almora. And then slept there, and again I started looking, and looking and around, and Harakam Baba, nobody knew anything in Almora. Then I was quite lost my hope, and I saw up tourist information. So I go up there, and there was this man, and said, I'm looking for this Harakam Baba. Do you know anything? No, I don't know anything. But they told me he's here in Almora, I don't know anything. And then he turned towards the window, and down there was a guy who was shoveling, doing some heavy work there. And he said, Tum Harakam Baba Jante? Do you know Harakam Baba? He said, yes, yes. He says, he's up here, Chittai Mandir. So he explained me where this Babaji was. And with this Chittai temple, Chittai Mandir. And so I walked up, about 1 hour walk outside of Almora, and then I started walking towards the temple, and I hear music of an harmonium, and I see this man sitting there with 4 or 5 people around him, and I approached about 15, 20 meters, and he looked at me, and it was such a strong thing that when he looked at me, his eyes were so strong. And I had this feeling that I know him. The first thing that came to me, I was very familiar. I know him, I was thinking, but I know you, I was thinking. And I stopped there, I didn't understand. He was very powerful. This I felt. So I was attracted by this sense of very familiar, and then little impressed by his strength, very powerful presence. And so while I was there, staring at him, looking at him, trying to understand what to do, more people were coming, sitting in front of him, singing. And then one lady, I think she was American, she spoke, she said, "Oh, you came here also to see this guy like this, very freely, like." And I said, "Yes, well," and I saw that in the moment she came up to me, Babaji looked in our direction, and then he called an Indian man who was close by and whispered something in his ear. So, and this girl started talking to me, and this man was walking towards us. And he arrived to us and said, "Babaji said, you cannot stay here." So this girl started to protest. I said, "No, whoa, whoa, whoa." And I said, "He is right." And I turned and went away in the chai shop, where I could sit and see him from a distance, but it was quite far away. So I was sitting there in this chai shop, and I took some breakfast, and there were some people who were going towards the temple. And at a certain point, a woman passed, and something in me says, "This must be Valeria. This could be this Valeria." And I called, "Valeria, Valeria." And I saw that she made like this, but she kept walking. And this girl was Goradevi.
Wow.
Ah,
But I didn't know she was Goradevi, I only know Valeria. So she turned around, like, say, "What?" And then after a while, I was sitting there, and an Indian man came up to me, and he was a devotee of Baba, the bank owner or bank director of Nainital, very nice guy. And he asked me how I was, what I was doing there, and he took care of me a little bit. And I explained him that I heard about this Babaji. I was just curious to see him, that I was going to plan to go to Nepal, that I was not particularly interested, but I would have liked to meet. And I talked to him about this Valeria, this Italian lady, and I explained him the story of this Valerian. And he said, "Oh, this must be Goradevi. Wait here." So he went, called Gora, and Gora arrived. And so Gora asked me, "Why you want to come?" And I said, "Look, I met this Valeriano." Oh, I said, "Yes, my friend Valeriano, very good friend. Oh, he's going." I told him the story. "Oh, he's going back to Italy." "Oh, okay." And I said, but I said, "So it is possible to meet Babaji?" And Gora looked at me and said, "Why do you want to meet him?" And I said, "Hey, I'm just curious, I'm not interested in spiritual things. I'm on my way to Nepal. But if it's possible to see him, otherwise we go, no problem. I don't care." And she said, "Okay, come." And so me and my girlfriend, we arrived. We went to the temple, and the Chitai Mandir. Ramlotha, you know Chitai Mandir for sure. Eh? It's all these bells. It's a temple dedicated to a local form of Kalbhairav. And at the time they were killing goats, sacrificing goats twice a day. They were cutting the heads of a goat and putting the blood on the lingams there. It was, when Baba was there, they didn't do it. This I discovered later. And so it was a very intense, and Baba was sitting there behind the temple with all these bells. It has all the people who comes, kill a goat and put a bell. So the production, all the go around of the temple was thousands of bells altogether. So you couldn't really make a ding dong. Ding dong, there was ding, 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 an incredible metal sound, very strong and strange. Anyway, Baba was sitting there, and I arrived there, and he looked at me, and he was having some bananas, and he throw very quick 2 bananas, perfect, from 3 meters distance, 4 meters distance. This banana came just on my chest, and he asked me, "Do you come by land or by plane?" And this surprised me a lot, because when I was there, I had developed a pride. I was very proud that I went by land. So I had made up this idea that the people who went to India by plane were not real travelers. Only the one who did the trip by land were really of any value. So it struck me that he made this question to me so close to my ego, you know. I didn't know what the ego was at the time, but he took me right in the right spot. And so we went there and stayed there and a little bit, and then he told me that we stayed there half an hour. Suddenly he brought a chai. We had a chai. He offered us a chai, and then he told me that we couldn't stay there because he was traveling with a short group of people. They were hosts in some houses around the temple, and I had to go to sleep in Almora. And then if I wanted, I could have come back the next morning. And I said, okay. And but I didn't like this idea to go back to the hotel in Almora. So I went back to my chai shop where I was before, and I looked at the owner. It looked like a nice man. And I asked him, "Excuse me, can we sleep here tonight?" And he said, "We put our luggage inside and we sleep here on the benches with our sleeping bag." And he said, "Okay, okay." So Arti started. This music started from the ashram. I didn't know what it was. And I went up there. And I arrived and Baba was sitting there. Everybody was chanting. And as soon as he looked at me, he called Goradevi and he asked what he's doing there. Goradevi arrived to me and said, "Babaji said you have to go away. Where are you staying?" I said, "I sleep in the chai shop," I said. And so she was surprised and she went back to Baba, and Baba remembered, he looked at me and then he said, "Okay, he can stay." So I could stay. I sat there, and it was an incredible experience, that Arti there, because that bhajans. Well, many leelas happened, and I started to feel something. I was very attracted, but I was also afraid to be hypnotized. I was afraid to especially the Om Namah Shivaya chanting. I found so deep that I was going inside. I felt that I had to be careful not to be hypnotized. And then I was looking at Baba all the time, and he had his ways of moving and his eyes, this power, and also he was so with the people around. So it was very fascinating to watch. I couldn't take my eyes out of it.
Just a moment. Huh?
And
Just a moment.
What was a nice lila was that Westerner wanted some Mozart chocolates, a box. These Mozart chocolates, very special kind of, that are very famous in Austria. And Trieste, my home city, is very close to Austria. So I was already a few months in India, few months traveling, 3 months traveling, no chocolates, little sick. The idea, I saw these chocolates, I had an intense desire. And in the moment I had this intense desire, Baba kind of looked, I thought that I saw Baba's eyes dart towards me. And I said, "Hey," he felt that these chocolates. I was not sure, but he told the woman there to distribute. So the woman started to distribute all the chocolates. she gave it to all the Westerners. I was sitting with the Indians, the locals, with the children. So when she finished all the Westerners, she didn't give me half box of chocolates, but she went back to Baba. And Baba said, more, distribute more. So she came back and she didn't know what to do, so she gave it to me, the box to distribute. So I received this box that I desired. And so I said, this is very strange, no? But it was very nice. So there were all the children. I took my knife out. I divided all the, many children we were. I divided all the chocolates in 4 parts and I gave it around. And then in the end, Baba said that if I wanted, I could help to prepare prasad for tomorrow, for the next day. The next day there would have been a big Havan Kund, a big fire ceremony. And he told me, if you want, you can help to prepare the food. And I said, oh yes, why not? So I went there and I peeled potatoes till 10 o'clock in the night. Then I went to sleep in the chai shop. And the next morning I went up. They told me that I had to bath. So there was a water water ooze there in the garden. I took it and I took off my dress and I kind of bathed a little bit, and I went and I saw this fire ceremony. That was incredible. I didn't know what it was, but it was really very intense and strong. And then Baba was leaving, and Gora Devi brought me to say, come to say hello to Babaji. And so I went up to Baba, and he looked at me and he said, you can ask me anything you want. I was so surprised, but I was so surprised. I had no idea. I never thought anything. My plan was to go to Nepal. And in there, I hear my voice say, I wanna come with you. I don't know why I said that thing. And he smiled very sweetly and he said, no, you go back your country. He told me like that, very sweet. And so I was a little bit, I didn't like that answer, but he was very loving. He said, you go back your country. And I said, okay. And we saw him leave with all the other people. And then I went on to Nepal, and I had a beautiful trip. I have to say, after meeting Baba, all the trip went very well, before many problems, and after very well. And then I came back to Italy 5 months later in November, and all my life changed. And then around 80, I started to have a dream, and he said, come. And I went back to Herakan, and he welcomed me and he gave me my name. And he gave me some training. And that's about it.
Wow.
It's a long story.
Long story.
I hope I didn't.
Yeah,
I
beautiful.
hope I didn't. I hope I didn't
So
bore you.
beautiful. No, so beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
You
And
really,
thank you for sharing.
really wanted to meet Babaji. And that reminds me of how I went to Babaji. I also didn't write or find out. I knew Baba was in Harakan. So I flew into Delhi. This was February. I didn't take time to get a passport, and I guess I had a passport but no visa. And I flew into Delhi, and this was February, mid-February, toward the end of February, I guess it was, and 1981. And I arrived in Delhi and went to a specific guest house I was told to stay at, and only to find out that Babaji wasn't at Harakan either. And he was actually in Manda, well, not Manda at this time, he was in Wapi in Gujarat. And once again, like you, I went with $100 in my pocket, which was not a lot of money for spending in India. And so I spent pretty much all my money going from Delhi to Bombay, which was Bombay still in those days, and then took a bus to Wapi, and then I had this little piece of paper that said, a couple of words. I had no idea where to find Babaji. And the same thing, I was living in Hawaii at the time, and I bought him a Valentine hearted chocolate and these beautiful anthurium flowers from Hawaii that are like hearts. And so, this is already day 3 or 4. I'm traveling to try to find him. What's that? New speaker. Nita. Anyway, I think she.
I think you can mute if you want, Ramlotiji.
Compared to EP, some of like the Indian families here, all people in India, they eat everything very late.
What's this?
We can do.
There's another. I can do that. Okay. Great. There are 2 Smitas, sorry. Anyway, so I finally get to this place called Balsar Station. That's what I was told. And it was overwhelming. I was an American woman, very polite, and there's all these people trying to cram onto buses, and I was waiting politely in line, and people kept cramming and the buses kept going. And I was in tears, and my flowers just went like, they died, and the chocolate was all melted. And finally, I stay in a hotel, a little hotel where I'm scared to death to stay in. And the next morning, I just get a rickshaw driver, and I hand him the picture, this thing, Balsar Station or Harakan Baba, and somehow they knew where it was in Wapi, the family that he was staying at. And I was in a traveling dress, which was just like Indonesian dress, maybe down to about almost to my ankles, but not quite. And I had bought a sari. I heard you had to wear a sari in front of Babaji, and this is so similar to your idea. And I had that in my backpack, but I had no idea where I was going on this rickshaw. So I kept my traveling dress on, and in my backpack I had the sari and everything. And I come to the gate, and Babaji had seen me arrive and sent Janaki Rani from Italy, because she spoke English. Her name Lisetta, a famous photographer in Italy, who built the ashram Cisternino. And so Baba sent her to greet me at the gate, and she said, Babaji said to come. And they were in the middle of Arti. They had set up a big tent in somebody's lawn in Wapi. And like I said, I didn't have a clue about anything either. I didn't know what Arti was or anything. I was, and I said, well, I don't have my sari on. I just have this, this dress on. Will it be okay? And Janaki Rani, of course, the perfect person to send. She says, oh, Babaji gave me permission not to wear a sari, because she was quite a bit older. And so she had like a wraparound skirt and a nice shirt on or something like that. It was long, but still. And so she said, you do what you want. Well, what I wanted was to meet Babaji immediately. So I go into this tent, and they're singing this beautiful arti, and I just, like you, started weeping and weeping, just feeling at home. And at the time I was working on my master's and doctorate in psychology, and I'd done so many therapies on myself and all this. And I knew in that moment that whatever this was, and I didn't even know what it was, I would do that the rest of my life. And I would never finish my studies, which I never did. And so I'm sitting there in Arti just having, this realization after realization. And then Janki comes up to me and she said, people were all standing up for line now. It was Hare Kandi Bowl time toward the end, when people would go up for Darshan and they'd bring their gifts. And so she said, now you can get in line and meet Babaji. And I said, oh, but I don't have my sari on. So it's the same thing. The sari was so in my head because I was told you're supposed to wear sari. And so, and she said, oh, you do what you want. And she kept telling me this. And like, of course I wanted to go meet Babaji. So I stood in line after, up in line with other people and maybe had my melted box of chocolates. I don't remember. And so I get up to see Babaji and I go to pranam. And he yells at me. He said, you, no pranam, no sorry. And I just started crying. And so I didn't know what to do. Nobody around spoke English, nobody. And one nice woman that knew something, maybe she lived there, she took me aside and, and sort of, so the first words Baba says to me is no. And obviously he was teaching me that, my mind was thinking about this outside, not this inside. That's what I got. But anyway, so she took me in a room and helped me put on my sari. It was a beautiful sari that I'd bought in Delhi. And then I went back in line and then Baba, I pranam, and he just looked at me and he said, one of those looks like you said, there's just love and sweetness. And he said, what is your country? And I said, United States. I was so scared by that. I was afraid to say a word. And I said, United States. He said, what is your name? And I said, Deborah. He said, no, your name Debbie. Because I'd always been called Debbie my whole life, and B's in India are very similar. And then he said, no, your name Debbie, something like that. I thought, wow, he knew my name forever since I was a little girl. And then he said, no, your name Ramloti. And he gave me some prasad. And I said, Babaji, what does Ramloti mean? And he said, you go ask Sastriji. So I just felt welcome and at home. And so then I went to ask Sastriji and he said, oh, Ramloti, very good name. One who carries God in their heart at all times, when they're sleeping and when they're working and when they're dancing and when they're praying and when they're, went on and on. I just thought, wow, this is pretty cool to have a name like that. So that's how I got my name. And then I had to, of course, because I didn't do anything properly, I just went, when I heard about Babaji, I went. So then I had to stand in line again and ask him if I could stay. And you can imagine how scared I was. And he was just so kind. He said, oh, yes, you stay over there. There's a small house where there are a few Westerners were there. I think Loknath and Motu and a few other people. And you can stay in their house and everything. So that's how I got there. Also with flowers that were dead and wasn't so easy. And a rude awakening when I got there to really shake my insides. So. But many wonderful stories in those 30 days, and all I knew is that when my children got out of school, I wanted to bring them there for the summer, which we did. So. And as far as I know, I've never heard anybody named Ramlotha or Ramloti in the world. I don't understand why. A vessel of God seems like there's servants of Ram. There's lots of Ram Dasas. And, but I don't understand.
An Indian man, when I told him, what is your name, Ramlotha, he started laughing and he said it doesn't exist. It's a stupid name, like call somebody Ram Cup or something like that,
Ram's Cup. Yeah, people call me Vessel. Hello, Vessel. You're the vessel of Ram.
Yeah. And then when I was in Arakan, I did the Italian restaurant in the Gufa. So often Baba would come there and he had several lotas and he would tell me, Ramlotha, lota lao. Ramlotha, bring me a lota.
One time I was sitting in
And I
Harakan.
was running to the river to take the water for him. It was very sweet.
One time I was sitting in Harakan, just, I don't know, over by the garden, probably where you met him that first time in Harakan. And I was just sitting there by myself, and Baba came over and he put his hands up to my ears like this. And he said, Ramloti, Ramloti, Ramloti. He just kept saying Ramloti, Ramloti. And some of you, Avanish, some of the others, Prasant, you can let me know. But I was told that that's how you, in many traditions of India, you give the baby the name this way by going into their ear with their name. So
Yeah.
I felt like he really implanted that in my, and I feel like a name is like a mantra. So I hear Ramloti, it reminds me, because we all have God within us all the time. But to live that way is a different story. And so every time I hear the name, it helps me remember that God is in me and in everybody else.
Yeah, but I've heard if your guru they say mantra or in your ear,
Mhm.
it means your kundalini chakra, they are opening your chakras.
Mm,
Mm.
quite possibly. That's here we are now. How many years later, Ramlotha? 40 years later. And there's nothing else I'd rather do than be here.
Beautiful.
So we have a little more time for some questions that people would like to hear. I mean, there's a great story, but I think that's too long, your story about the pendant, Ramlotha.
The brute. Yes.
We'll refer people to Ramloti Wood YouTube channel under devotee stories. You'll see Ramlotha's story about this pendant, and it's an amazing story, but we'll leave people to ask questions right now, and they can
Yes.
see that on the YouTube.
Mhm.
So does anybody have a question?
I do, Ramloti.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this is Biggie. Hello, good evening. A question to both of you, Ramloti and Ramlota. Buonasera. I would like to know, sometimes Babaji looked very different, like another person. So totally, I know that he changed his, how can I say, when he was very young, he was much slimmer and so, but also his way of looking, sometimes very severe, sometimes very boyish, kind of like very sweet. So I had the impression yeah, this is somehow fascinating to me, that he changed his looks. And not that he changed his looks, but he seemed to be, yeah, so different sometimes.
Yeah, there's a beautiful interview in the Yoga Journal. I can't remember who wrote it, but this was in the early 80s. I think she asked, or maybe it was a story that an English devotee told some of us, that she took a picture of Babaji to her psychic in England when she went home. And the psychic said, "This is not a human being. This is nothing." And, you know, it's just, and Baba would say, "I'm a mirror." And so it was amazing where he would be looking, Ramlot and I might be sitting at Arti with Baba together. And after I might say, "Oh, wasn't Baba looking severe tonight? And Ramlotha said, oh, he looked like a pussy willow, so sweet and loving, And so everybody was having a different experience at this, or from moment to moment, like you said, you would watch him and he's like stern with one person and so sweet with the next. I always felt he was reflecting back and also giving us what we needed. Ramlotha?
Very well explained.
Yes, it was really amazing to watch him, really for the first months, but you couldn't take out your eyes away from him. It was so fascinating to watch because he was changing all the time, especially when people were in line for darshan. You could see that he was like changing according to the people who were coming to him, It was incredible to watch. So fast changing. So it was really very special.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Pooja. I'm from India, staying in United States now. So I have one question. I mean, I am in touch with Ramloti, and since long now, I know her channel. Every videos I watch. So I was just thinking, I have seen many videos of Babaji where it's a pictorial view and like a live video, but I have never heard his voice. Do we have any video anywhere
Yes. Yes, there is.
where I can get that video?
Yeah,
It's on YouTube.
if you send me your email, I'll send you a link of a very beautiful translation that was just done by Raghuvir. So it's his voice and then a beautiful translation done by Sanjeev. So that's beautiful. And there's other of his speeches too available.
Okay,
He
so
had
he's
a beautiful voice, and also his laughter. It was so musical. It was going like, and it was laughing.
True.
It was like a symphony.
Yes.
okay. So
True.
I'll send you my email ID. I think you will give your email IDs in the end. I have that Hirakan Universal Ashram email
That's
ID.
enough, Pooja. Just send it there. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll post Ramlotha, yours is pretty easy. Do you want to just say it out loud now? Would you be willing to give your email ID to anybody?
Yes. Shall I spell it now or not?
Or do you know how to do a chat? I don't.
No, I don't have.
Okay, just spell it out. Spell it out. Everybody get your pencil ready that wants to.
So Ramlotha is with the TH, RAMLOTHA.
The rate?
At
I forgot it, at gmail.com.
easy. Yeah. Very nice. Thank you. Ramlotha. Somebody just wrote it out for him.
Yes, it's small r, the first one.
Lowercase r. So
All small.
Ramlotha. Okay, thank you. Somebody asked about what was this, I think the schedule like with Babaji, and it's just like the ashram here pretty much, only probably earlier and more severe. We were all younger then. We would try, I would try to be up and bathe before 4 o'clock in the river, go in the Gautama go under the river. The rumor was if at 4, a little breeze came up, so it's warmer before 4, but more so because anytime after 4, Baba could come out of his, Baba's door could open, and then it was time we could go in to receive the chandan from Babaji. And so by 4, I wanted to always be bathed and waiting outside of his room. And it was just amazing that we could go into his room. And we built a kutir here for Babaji, and it's got a bed for him and everything for when he comes here, which hopefully he will. And when we were making the bed, building the bed, I said, wait, it has to be this high. And I would kneel in front of the bed and I'd put my head like this, like I would put in his lap. And I said, this is how high it has to be. So Baba could sit there cross-legged, and you would put your head in his lap, and he would take your face, I remember, so gently. And then he'd take his hands and he'd put the chandan on your forehead and then sort of straighten, put the red mark and then the rice. And that was so, to this day, I can just, makes me cry just thinking the tenderness. Babaji could be very gruff when he told me I couldn't. He also threw me out of the ashram once, and and so, but the tender moments are the moments I think I remember the most, when he would look at me and I'd be crying. I remember I had me buy some earrings, and Indian earrings are so fat. And so he was putting them in my ears for me, and my holes weren't big enough. And so he's poking, basically piercing my ear there. And my tears are coming down my face because it really hurt. And he took my head once again and he looked at me, he says, "You okay?" And I just said, what could you say? It's like, I'm more okay than ever in my life because you're doing this. And of course, I'm in great pain too. But anyways, to go on, then after, you would sit outside his little fire pit outside of his room. And then he would do a sacred fire ceremony. And like Ramlotha, I didn't know anything about anything. And as I sat there for his fire ceremony, I knew that in those moments he was influencing the whole cosmos. That's what I knew, because he didn't say the mantras out loud. He would just say them quietly, and he would be the only one to offer. And we would sit there around this fire. It was quite dark, and his patio overlooked the Gautama Ganga. And he would look up like this, and then he'd look out, and I just knew that this was something really important, that whoever this being was, the Lord of the universe, was affecting. And then we would go to our rooms, and we were supposed to, I think, meditate or do something, quiet puja, and then we'd meet for arti in the morning and sing for 1 hour, and Baba would come in, and we would all pay our respects, and then have a bite to eat and go off to work till lunchtime. And after lunch, we'd have a little rest and then back to whatever our job was. I often worked in the office or the shop, sometimes carried rocks and sometimes carried Baba's umbrella. So, and then at 6, we'd take our bath and be ready for evening arti. And at 7 to 9 or 8 to 9 or 10, depending on the season. And then it was quickly to bed because morning came very early.
10 p.m. was silence.
Huh?
10 p.m. was silence.
Yeah. And do you remember more about any of that, Ramlotha?
Well, yeah. Well, I arrived in November, so pretty soon came December. I remember the cold baths in the Kotamaganga at 4 o'clock in the morning. And also I discovered that at 4:20, the wind was coming up. So the hardest part was not so much for me to jump in the water, but when you come out, and if you have the cold wind, then you feel it. So you had to be in the water really at 4. So you had to get up in your room at 3:30, when you had to wake up 3:30, if you had any hope to save yourself. Yeah. But then did the first month like this, the first 1 month, and then he sent me alone in India for 2 months. He said, "You go alone in India," and soon after Christmas. And I went again all Kumaon. I did the same trip that I made the first time, Chilianola, Almora, but with some knowledge. I went to Swamiji's home near.
That place. Yeah.
Near Almora, and I went around there. And then I came back and I did the Italian restaurant. So I slept in Gufa. Then he always kept me in Gufa to sleep. And in Gufa was completely different because the river was very close by. You had not to do the steps. It was more natural. I am kind of little natural. I don't like so much structures. And so that was perfect for me, for my practice, for my sadhana.
So someone has asked on the chat, I think it was, how did you get used to Babaji's darshan? I think that was the question that somebody asked. And I would say that I never got used to it. It was different all the time. I have to say, a lot of the time I was wrapped up on me and not even, I read these beautiful stories of people who had all these cosmic experiences, and me, I was worrying if my hair was nice or if my sari was nice, and if Baba would give me a candy, so I was thinking a lot about me. But there were also times when Baba would just look in my eyes, and I just knew that it didn't even matter if I was ugly or pretty or messy or bad. Or one time I dropped his bag I was carrying, and all his things fell out down the side of the mountain. And I just knew when he looked at me like that it didn't matter. He loved me always any way I was, and that was so important. And I remember some nights sitting there in Arti, particularly when we sit outside in the veranda when it was too hot in the summertime, and he would just turn into light. And so the answer is I've never gotten used to it. And even now here in this temple, I feel Baba's and Mother's darshan, and it just permeates my body. And I can't say that I'm used to it. I'm just grateful every time, and it's always different. So if that's the question, that was my answer. I never got used to it. Ramlotha?
Well, yeah, I think it depends. Now, we have a very limited mind, a very limited vision. So we see what we can, what we want to see, maybe. And so I arrived there and I saw this man. For me, it was a man, but it was not a man, That body was not. I had an experience with him about this. It was quite intense. Maybe I can relate to you. Baba often said in his speeches, he said, I want to make a creation of strong, courageous people, strong and courageous people. He often said it in his speeches. And I felt very weak. I felt very, very weak. So one day I saw him alone with Gora on a bench in front of the Mother's temple. But at the time there was only the Mother temple. The two temples were only up, Mother's and Sitaram. And so I saw this chance, beautiful, alone with Gora, who was for Italians, Gora was our translator official. So I took my courage with 2 hands and I went up to him and I said, Baba, I feel very weak. How can I become strong? And he looked at me and he said, as an answer, massage my back. And he turned and he offered me his back. So I started massaging his back. And after a while, I was massaging, touching, doing. I realized something strange, that he didn't have any soft part where my fingers could go inside, like, in the muscle, the finger goes inside more than when over a bone. Somehow, this body would look like he was one thing with this very soft skin, few millimeters of soft material, and then it was like one solid thing. And I started strange. I was thinking it's strange. And then he had this big belly in the time. He had developed this big belly. So from behind, I started to go towards his belly, and also his belly was the same so hard, it's like a block of diamond with this very soft skin. And when I, I went towards the belly, when I arrived here, he made that laugh that I mentioned before. He made like this, a laugh. And I don't know why I had this thing came to me. He is not a human being like me. This thing flashed in my mind, and it was a realization in my body also that he was not a human being like me. And I said, "Oh shit!" I thought, no, and I started a little bit shaking, and I looked up towards on my left. There was the Mount Kalash, and somehow I cannot explain how I saw Baba's form compressed in the mountain. The mountain was Babaji in a compressed in form. And I never had any visions. I'm quite a basic man. I never had anything. So it was very strange to see this thing. And then I turned to the right, and the Gautama Ganga was there. And somehow I saw a liquid form of Baba in the water of the river. And then I said, "Oh my God," like this. And I went back and I looked up, and Baba was in a gas form in the air. And then I started shaking, 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 incredible. And he came, turned back very swiftly, and he put his feet on my here, on my here. You see, just to press here. And I started massaging his feet, and I could slowly, slowly come down. So maybe that was also darshan of because most of the time now, I thought it was a man. I related to him like he was another man, no? A person. But it was not. No? And this thing was incredible, this experience, but also it was incredible when, for example, you started to have a thought, and he would answer to your thought even before you were really conscious of what you were thinking. No, he would answer. You know, your Ramlotha, you probably for sure you had this kind of experiences. So how is possible? I always wonder how is possible. The only answer is that was one with us. Because the Indian scripture said that Baba is our own true self, no? This is the truth, no? Baba is always with us. He's here now, no? In this moment with all of us. And we we don't realize it, no? We often forget. I often forget. But the truth is that he is always with us. Especially now that we meet to talk about him.
So special. I want to thank you so much for being here. And we've been doing this each week. We won't have one next week. We'll have Mahasamadhi chanting, but we will have some people probably on the, we're hosting next week's Mahasamadhi chanting, which won't start though till 7 in the evening. Hard for Europeans maybe. But the people who hosted Babaji in Nepal for the first time, the only time he went to Nepal, that family is in touch with us through one of the families who comes here often. And she actually met Babaji. She met Babaji at that time, and she was a little girl. But her parents and the family in Nepal may be on, and maybe they'll tell a few stories as well. Because I don't know about you, Ramlotha, but my heart is full of Babaji at this moment, and probably everybody watching this is also feeling that. It's a very, very strong to talk about Baba and to be with others. That's what Satsang is coming together with people who are help us all come into that experience of being with God or the divine or Babaji, whatever name you would use. So.
Yeah.
So the week after, we'll have Loknath and Sandra Ray. The week after that, we have not Full Singh, Jayanand and Sundar Singh from Switzerland. And the week after that, we'll have Karku and Jamuna from Thailand. So there's just not enough weeks in the year, I don't think, to go around the world. And so they're all on the website. And this will be posted on the YouTube under Satsang with devotees. And you'll see the 3 already done. So if somebody missed it or you missed part of it or want to hear it again. And don't miss Ramlotha's story under devotee stories. And it's Ramloti wood, 2 separate words on the YouTube channel. They're all stored there. So it's a treasure.
If it's possible to send that link in the newsletter, that everyone will get it.
Okay, I will post Ramlotha's story in the newsletter. Yeah, it was a little windy background. I was videotaping him outside in Chisternino. It was hot and windy, but it's still comes. You know the one about the pendant that he gave to somebody, and it's just a story.
The one of the brooch was in Holland.
Oh, was it in Holland? Okay.
The audio is okay of that one. Yeah.
Anyways, wherever. But thank you for being with us, and thank you to all. I'm going to actually, let's all view everybody now for a moment so that we can say hello, goodbye to everybody. And many people don't have their cameras on. But
thank you so much, Ramloti, for inviting me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
big blessing, and his email is there if you would like to reach out to him, and you should know the ashram email as well. So any questions or suggestions, we're open to it. So thank you all for being here today, and may Baba's love and blessings and fill your hearts. Divine Mother, for me as Babaji, is all the same, the divine feminine. So Bole Baba Ki Jai.
Hello.
Yay. Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you.